Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, committee members, for being here on this wonderful Groundhog's Day. And I hope we all have desires to watch Bill Murray's Groundhog later this evening. Yes, perfect. Okay. Yeah, we've got some good traditions going. I love it. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We have here with us today myself, Vice Chair Carey is in person with us. Member Wood is here, and Member Lear is here. Member Hart will be joining us online a little bit later. So we'll just keep an eye out for her. And Vanessa, you'll just let us know when you see her. Thank you. We do not have any public comment this morning, so we're going to jump straight to agenda item 2.2, recognition of progress, achievements, or improvements. And we've invited Nathan Ock to tee us up here.
Thanks, Chair. Nathan Ock, STEM coordinator for the Utah State Board of Education. Is it okay if I share some slides? Yeah, that'd be okay if that works for you.
As we were mentioning earlier this morning, and for those listening in, Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy, that we don't often get these opportunities to hear about updates from programs and recognize achievement. But as I was looking at the topic, this is kind of the day of licensing, because we've got, we'll be talking about these endorsements, the endorsements incentive program, and then many of our rules are licensing oriented. So it's a good kind of theme of how to support teachers in their professional learning and improving themselves and being licensed. So anyway, excited to hear it.
Thanks, Angie. It's a pleasure, honor, and a privilege to have the opportunity to take a few minutes today to share some updates connected to the STEM Endorsement Incentive Program, or as we call it colloquially, the STEM EIP. So before I get into the administration of the program, I just want to honor the work that a number of staff across USB have done. Our current STEM EIP lead, Isaac Pitcher, is online. And Isaac, if you don't have your camera on, there he is. Isaac has been instrumental in upscaling this program and also helping kind of corral the data into a kind of usable fashion. It's the original administration of the program was done a little bit differently, which has made the data lift a big one. And Isaac has been just really a powerful collaborator in that process. And then I also wanted to honor Melissa Mendenhall, our elementary science specialist, who was instrumental in like kind of building this program, as well as former STEM coordinator Jolie Honey. So jumping into the program, just to make sure that everyone is aware of how this program works, teachers who have or who are seeking a STEM endorsement, and that STEM endorsement can be any of the STEM letter acronyms, science, technology, and or mathematics, as well as educational technology. And then there's a number of CTE endorsements that also qualify for this program. So anyone who's seeking that endorsement, whether they have a current endorsement in that space or are just seeking another one, are eligible. In addition to seeking those endorsements, if they're public educators, they're on a teaching contract currently, and they pass a course associated with earning that endorsement with a C or better, that they're eligible for this money. The money allocated for this program is flow-through funding. It's $1.2 million in ongoing funding that goes in its entirety to LEAs every year. And there's two pathways with regards to earning reimbursement money for those courses that teachers can use. They can use the kind of teacher-based pathway where they're in a program and every course that they take, they can submit to their LEA for reimbursement connected to. And then there's also the cohort model, or the administrator-based model. And Isaac's also been instrumental in help scale the number of opportunities across the state where teachers can participate in a cohort with other like-minded teachers that are earning that same endorsement. And so instead of the teacher having to like do all of the paperwork to submit what they're doing, the administrator for the entire cohort can submit that at one time connected to the program. So for other kind of specifics connected to the program, we have a FAQ set up. You can access that at the bit.ly on the screen. And so the last thing that we wanted to share is just some updates on the number of teachers that have been touched and the amount of money that has been allocated to those teachers in two separate mechanisms. I'll talk about the second mechanism in addition to the reimbursement in just a second. So in the FY23 fiscal year, there was almost the entirety of our ongoing funds allocated to teachers, just over $1 million, as you can see on the screen. And of that total allocation, $650,000 was for reimbursement of endorsement coursework, and $500,000 was went in as an incentive to teachers that actually earned their endorsement. So not only is there money in place to help teachers along their process and earning their endorsement and better serving their students, but upon reaching the end game of that and earning their actual endorsement, they also have an incentive that they earn at that point. So in the fiscal year 23, there was 580 teachers that were touched, and that covered course taking of about 1,100 or almost 1,200 courses. In FY24, you can see that for the first time, we were able to kind of scale the program beyond what the ongoing funding allows for, to start spending down some of the carry forward funds. And you can see in all of these categories, with the exception of the teachers reimbursed and the courses reimbursed, that our numbers are higher already in FY24 than they were in FY23. And so we'll see these numbers rise a little bit between now and the end of this fiscal year. So the trends that we can kind of extrapolate from that process is on the upward swing. After a dip in course taking and reimbursement during the pandemic, as you would expect, we're now seeing that every one of our metrics within the SEMI-IP is trending in the right direction. The FY24 bars in each of these graphs that you can see here we haven't reached the end of the fiscal year, so we anticipate that those bars will be bigger than the bars in the center. This covers number of teachers receiving the reimbursement and the number of courses reimbursed. And so if you look at this through January, we can already see the same trend occurring, that we're moving towards reimbursing more teachers and more courses year over year. So to conclude, we're feeling really positive and hopeful about where the trends in this program are kind of lending themselves. We're seeing increases in elementary and secondary reimbursements. There's a few reimbursements that aren't represented on that FY24 bar yet. So we anticipate that we'll be higher in elementary and secondary reimbursements by the end of the year. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also starting to spend down those carry forward funds. So we're hopeful in a few years that we'll be to a sustainable point where we're using consistently the funds that are coming in, and we've spent down the carry forward bucket that we've kind of amassed. So expenditure by fiscal year, same trends that we were just talking about. And so these numbers are what I'll conclude with. Over $4 million in funds have gone directly as flow-through funding to teachers across the state of Utah earning their STEM endorsements. So that's over 2,000 teachers that have been touched, over 3,800 courses that have been we've supported teachers in being able to engage in, and these numbers are a little bit fuzzy, so you can see why the bottom and the top of that potential range is pretty big, and that's due to the untrustworthiness of the data set that we have early on. It's hard to pull things from like 250 PDFs in Utah grants. So our data isn't great for the first few years of the program, but we estimate that there are 20 to 30% of current Utah STEM teachers that have been touched by the SEMI-IP funding in some way, which feels like a pretty good amount. And we're excited by the potential to continue to raise that number into the future. So we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them. And thanks again for the opportunity to talk about the ways that teachers have been touched by this program. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Nathan. Isaac, is there anything you want to add to this?
I think that was very comprehensive from Nathan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Member Wood?
Just a question. So carryover meant so you had not expended all of it and it built up. Is that because, do we have teachers that qualify but just don't know about the program?
So there was probably a little bit of that, Chair, if it's okay if I respond. So there was probably a little bit of that in the early days of the program, and to be honest, there's probably still a smaller amount of that now. Part of it was putting in place, like having school districts and charters understand what the administration process looked like, and then kind of assign someone to be in charge of it. So we have that pipeline that's more kind of systemically in place now. And so I think it's a combination of both awareness and the kind of administrative structure in place to be able to easily like work through the process.
So pretty much right now, if they're qualified and they go through the right processes, it's there for them.
Yep.
I mean, we have the funds ready and available.
Yeah, you got it.
That's
And
it.
so there continues to be, I would have to look to see exactly how much carry forward funding is remaining, but there continues to be a pretty good pot of carry forward funds. So even if we exceed like our current ongoing appropriation at the moment, we have the funds to be able to continue to support teachers in that way.
Thank you. Just really appreciative of the work that's gone into this, that there's a program like this that is supporting our educators and that it's growing. That's obviously a good indicator that things are happening and moving in the right direction. So Nathan, Isaac, thank you for your time and for the, Member Lear.
Yeah, I just, the board had a program sort of similar to this 20-ish years ago, maybe. It's called PJEP. And it was a financial nightmare. And it sort of ended up just dissolving in a just uncollectibles. And I'm interested that this is a reimbursement the teachers pay, and then the program reimburses them their costs. Is that, and is it hard to manage financially, or I mean, be honest. I mean, because I think that's a factor in these programs. As much as I like them, if they take 10 people to manage, then it maybe isn't the best way to go.
Yeah, Chair, if
I know it's a public meeting and you don't want to air all your dirty laundry, but
so what I'll say, Board Member Lear, is at the beginning of the program, the administrative pathway that we initially tried, I don't know that I would use the word nightmare, but it was really complex and challenging, both for our staff as well as LEA staff. And so the new pathway that we've found, I think while it certainly requires a lot of time and attention and skill from Isaac on the data side to be able to bring kind of updates like the data that we have here, took a lot of digging and curating to get there. But I think that the administrative burden has been lowered to the point that it feels both manageable and sustainable.
okay, that's good to know. And we probably have better, just for lack of a better word, computer tracking systems than we did then. And it's probably a lot of it's automated and is handled that way. And it's better as a reimbursement program, even though the thinking was many years ago that that's exactly what teachers couldn't do, is put the money up front. But I guess we figured that out.
Yeah, and just to clarify, there are those cohort models that I was talking about. In many of those cases, teachers don't have to pay anything to participate. So whoever is administrating the program for the LEA, they bear the costs of the instruction, and then we reimburse the LEA directly. So there are a number of opportunities in which teachers don't have to provide that outlay initially,
Right.
but we want to make sure that there's as many flexible pathways for teachers to be able to engage in as possible.
Yeah, and I think paying the LEA is a smarter way to go too. Looks like we learned something from that other bad experience, so that's good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Member Lear. And thank you again, Nathan, Isaac, thanks for your work. Appreciate your time. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 2.3. This is R277-301 Educator Licensing Amendment, and it looks like Dr. Height is here with us.
He will be here.
Yeah, Dr. Height, please, let's get us started on this one.
Yes, good morning. My name is Malia Height. I'm the Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. Excuse me, and we have a number of board rules today related to educator licensing and preparation, mostly on the licensing side today. The first is R277301, which is our hallmark, kind of the ground floor of educator licensing rules. And the amendments that we're bringing today were considered by the Licensing Applauds Guidance Group, which is a group of about 20 stakeholders statewide that include higher ed faculty and teacher preparation, HR directors, Apple directors, that kind of support and help us define what is needed in the field. And they considered items from the recent licensing audit that was published last summer, and then other stakeholder feedback throughout the year. And so what you have here is some amendments that will improve the processes, the system, and reduce barriers for educators.
Okay, so if we can open up the rule on screen. I'm looking to the committee to see if there are any questions or motions that the committee would like to put forward here, or if the committee would like Dr. Height to kind of go through the changes of the rule. What are your thoughts here?
The latter.
Remember, okay, so Dr. Height, is that okay? Can we just go through the rule and highlight the changes, or?
You don't need to do the technical changes, but what I'm.
Sure.
Changes of substance, not necessarily technical.
Sure. So you'll see on lines 15 through 22, we have an amendment to adjust which institutions of higher education we accept bachelor's degree from, and we've moved from regionally accredited to an institution accredited by that's recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. The term regionally accredited was eradicated out of kind of the nomenclature for university accreditation in 2020. And so that adjustment is to align with those requirements. And then we have several places in the rule. We have changed the license length, the time of the license. It used to say 3 years or 5 years, but due to some technical limitations, technology limitations, we have school years and all licenses expire on June 30th. So that is to align with those practices. In lines 99 through 114, we made some adjustments to the associate educator license extensions. And this was to provide some simplicity as well as greater flexibility for our special educators who have some federal limitations and can only teach for 3 years under a temporary license. And so this allows them the ability to teach for all 3 of those years. While they're working towards a professional educator license. In lines 142 and 40 through 144, we've adjusted that the associate educator license for individuals without an earned bachelor's degree is only available if the candidate is in their capstone clinical experience, which is a student teaching or internship time of their preparation before the bachelor's degree is earned. In lines 185 and 186, we have added a pathway to earn an associate license in school counseling by demonstrating just some minimum competencies. It does not require the admission to the program. This is in response to some limited seats available in Utah programs for school counseling, and allows them the flexibility to work and serve as a school counselor while they're finishing some admission processes. In 265, through 267 as well, and then it pops to 308. It kind of all, this is together. This allows for an appeal process if an educator preparation program makes a recommendation to Utah State Board of Ed licensing team, and there's some sort of discrepancy or disagreement with whether or not the candidate has demonstrated all competencies. It allows for them to appeal. And then in 308, it defines the appeal committee to include an Apple director as a member of that committee. In lines 328 through 330, we're looking at teachers coming from other states and jurisdictions, and this aligns to the Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact, which was codified in state law last session, so that we can align with that. 350 through 352 requires some minimum training prior to awarding the LEA specific license, and so this would help give that training, and that was a request from LEAs to add that. And then the very last thing is in line 427. At the recommendation of AG Michelle Buse, we have added some clarification to the field that if LEAs do not comply with the requirement to have their educators background check, that for continued noncompliance, they are subject to our 277-114's corrective action. Yes. So the ability for the superintendent or the board to put an LEA under corrective action if they have assigned educators that don't have a background check. So that means they're in a classroom and we don't know if they have a cleared background check. If we notify the LEA and then they don't comply and get their candidate or their educators background checked, then the superintendency and the board could apply corrective action. And that already exists in Rule 114, and this addition is just to bring some real clarity and to notify the LEAs that that is possible.
Member Vice Chair Carey, will you, you got some questions?
Sorry. And this is procedure, but how are they able to get into the classroom without the background check? Isn't that a condition precedent to being in the classroom?
Yes, which is why if there's continued noncompliance, we would pursue some corrective action. There's no one physically standing at the door of the classroom checking that they have a background check. LEAs put teachers in there without a background check.
Against rule.
And state law.
And I'm not finished, board member there. How frequently does this happen? I mean, once is too many, but is this bigger than that?
Yes. So most recently this school year, we found 53 educators with assignments in Cactus working as an educator without a background check on file with the USBE.
And may I just ask, so when we find that out, what happens next?
So when we identify those educators, we immediately contact the educator, the principal of the school, and the HR director or business administrator of the school to notify them that they are not compliant with state law and that due to that lack of a background check, they're not able to receive any educator funding for that individual. And we give them about 2 weeks to become compliant. And then if they're not, then we send an official letter that they're not compliant. And this rule would clarify that corrective action is an option if they don't do anything and don't get that person qualified.
The letter that's sent, is that like an angry letter? Like, do we use like the sad face or angry emoji? I mean, it sounds like there should be more than just, we say 2 weeks. Do we pull, is the educator pulled from the classroom?
No.
So for that 2 weeks, we have someone that doesn't have a state required background check interacting with our students. in violation of the law?
Potentially, yes.
You say potentially, if they don't have the background check.
Some LEAs will choose to pull their teacher out of the classroom and put them on some administrative something else out of the classroom. It really is up to the LEA to determine that.
Chair, I'm sorry, one more.
Please, go ahead.
Is this issue more prevalent in our district schools, in our charter schools? Is it across the board? Where are these violations generally emanating from?
I would say we probably see about 80% of these conditions of noncompliance occurring in charter schools.
I mean, it's simply just unacceptable, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate to Vice Chair Carey's point here. And I know that staff feels the same way, right? And I know you're doing what you can. This may seem small, but it's at least something that we can do and going in the right direction. If there is more that we can do, I think for myself and Vice Chair Carey, it sounds like, and I won't speak for him, but let's look at options. How do we protect our kids? Because 2 hours is too long, right? Most schools, I look at my own, we don't let volunteers come in and be alone with kids without background checks. And so to see some of this slip through is discouraging. And we hope that our LEAs, and I know we talk about, we love our LEAs and we know that they're trying and we get that thing, but this, in my opinion, has nothing to do with a teacher shortage, right? It's a background check. So the individual is there. We have to make sure that we're diligent in taking those safety precautions for our students. Remember, Leary, you had Go
Couple
ahead.
of questions, but I also have had some experience with this issue, and I think that the discussion is a little more not nuanced than it appears. Then there are people without background checks in our classrooms. First of all, private schools don't require background checks. So there are lots of kids in lots of schools where teachers haven't had background checks. Also, teachers or schools are sometimes faced with dilemmas of, I could tell you many anecdotes, but of, do I use this special ed teacher whose background check revealed a problem 25 years ago out of state? So he's had the background check, but he hasn't been cleared through this office. Do I put that person in a classroom, or do I have no special ed teacher at all? So I think that it's a little more nuanced than is there a guard at the door that says no background check versus and no ticking, no laundry, or is it?
Yeah.
So I think that's important to note, that it's not just a violation by LEAs of any sort. It's more, do I have no choir teacher at all, or I know what I'm waiting for in terms of finding this background information that's required by this office, however long ago it was, however remote the location, versus having no teacher in that room at all.
And can I ask Dr. Hite, with the background check, are we talking about cleared? Because we actually had a meeting not too long ago with some individuals who are saying, yeah, so-and-so in their early 20s made a mistake. I'm in my mid to late 40s now, right? Does that just stay with me? And so when I think of this, it's, are the LEAs doing the work? Because at least we have some information, right? If the background check is going through, at least we know, like, okay, this was for petty theft. Let's just throw something out there, right?
Sure.
We can work with that. But if it comes back that it was a sexual offense of any kind, right, then obviously you have to look at that differently. So but the LEA needs to know, and if within that 2 weeks that the USBE says, no, we need to know what's going on and what you're seeing, I think that's helpful. And if there's still non-compliance, then the USBE has to have some sort of teeth to say, no, we really need to know what's going on. Am I off in that?
No, I think you're accurate. To provide some additional data that might be helpful for this conversation, of the 53 that we found without a cleared background check, there were only 2 that had completed fingerprinting, and that we were waiting on some sort of a UPAC investigation. I will note if there's any kind of violation that is sexual in nature or a crime against a child, those individuals are removed from the classroom.
And that
Thank
was
you.
my experience too, is that, but you still have the 53 that are.
That have never done a fingerprint
never
check. We
done-
know
right.
nothing.
Right, and but it's a combination of things, and it's not as clear as we have felons in our classrooms. That's what I think is
Yeah.
important to note publicly.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a time sucking process. It's not just you go have the background check at one of the various locations around the state, and then BCI immediately returns it, and then that information immediately goes to the school. It's a bureaucracy. It takes a while.
I've been through it.
Yes, as have most of us.
Right.
But I had a couple of other sort of more pointed questions.
Sure. And then after you is we'll go back to Vice Chair Carey.
And I thought, Malia, I'm looking on line 61 where it talks about 69, where it talks again about LEA specific licenses. I thought those had been rolled up into a different kind of license. Am I remembering wrong? There is still an LEA specific license.
There is still an LEA specific license. You just don't have to approve those renewals anymore. That was changed in 2020 when
Okay.
that became tedious.
Because there were so many of them. There was another area about LEA specific licenses that it seems like this rule affects, that when we'd had this discussion in a previous law and licensing committee group, it was different people, we had expressed concern that with LEA specific licenses, they at least should have this is on line 351 I'm looking, I just found it, that before they went into the classroom, they should have at least some training on educator ethics, classroom management instruction, basic SPED instruction. And this looks like that's not mandated anymore.
So actually the change does reflect what the committee discussed. So it used to be that the LEAs had a year of employment before that minimum training was required, and this change would require that minimum training prior to licensure.
But not necessarily prior to being in the classroom.
Correct.
And that concerns me more than background checks, frankly. That a teacher could be in a classroom with no training about educator ethics, classroom management, or SPED. And again, I know that reflects sometimes the need to have a teacher, but that troubles me. But I don't have an amendment either. And I know there'd be a huge uproar if I did. I had one more question. Oh, on the appeal process where licensing doesn't recommend and the teacher feels like that's unfair. How often does that really happen?
We've had just a handful. The appeal committee meets quarterly, and in each of those, for a variety of different licensing appeals, we have typically between 3 and 10 appeals to consider quarterly. Some of them are as simple as I have a degree from a nationally accredited institution because I did it online and they don't have a regional accreditor. And so we accept those bachelor's degree on appeal.
And do you usually on appeal, are they granted?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Those are the questions I had.
Thank you, Member Lear. Other questions from the committee? Okay. Any motions? If not, I'm willing to put one forth. Let me just check in quickly with Vanessa. Any word from Member Hart? Okay. We'd love to have a full committee when voting, but unfortunately that's not going to happen. So I'm going to put forth a motion here. I move that the committee approves R277 24-301, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that? Seeing no lights, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 4-0 with member Hart absent. Thank you. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to take just 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. Is that okay? We would just pause for 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for allowing that break. We typically don't do that during committee, but appreciate the patience of the public, staff, and the committee members. Let's go ahead and get started. We are joined by Vice Chair Hart is with us, or Committee Member Hart in this instance or circumstance. But thank you, Molly. Good to see you.
Thank you. I apologize.
No worries. We hope everything is as it should be. We are now jumping into agenda item 2.4, R277-302, educator licensing renewal. And again, we have Dr. Height here to tee us up.
Yes, thank you, Malia Height, Educator Licensing Executive Coordinator. And here in R277-302 is our educator license renewal rule. And we have one tiny change. It is to remove the form, to get the form signed for a license renewal if the educator has been an active continuous educator for the duration of the license. There's a requirement in state law and board rule that every LEA provide 20 hours, a minimum of 20 hours of renewal activity each year, which would meet the 100-hour requirement. And so that is all that we are changing here.
Thank you, Dr. Height. Member Laird, do you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? I know the rule is up on the board here.
It's 112. It's like 5 words.
Small.
Teeny tiny.
There was first, notwithstanding subsection, whatever.
Member Laird, you have a comment? Was there another changing? Oh, okay.
I don't think.
And Member Hart, we can't see your hand, so just speak up if you have any questions. I'd entertain a motion. If there, Member Lear.
I move that the committee.
Will you use your microphone? Thank you. I want Molly to hear. That's.
Oh, for sure. I move that the committee approves R277-302, still draft 1, on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you, Member Lear. The motion before the committee is that the committee approves R277-302 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion, Member Wood.
There is a draft 2 on backup.
It is too, you're right.
The draft 2 changed a year, right? That you only have to maintain your records for what,
a
2
year.
years?
I was
Let's,
fuzzy. Should I reread it?
well, do we, Dr. Height, can you just address draft 2 real quick?
Oops. Yes. So we identified yesterday that there is a disagreement in Rule 301 or 312 requires everybody to keep their materials for 1 year for monitoring purposes. And this says 2 years. And so we just wanted to have that alignment. So while we open the rule, we would suggest that we adopt draft 2, which changes that retention to 1 year only.
Thank you. Member Lear, if you're willing.
Sure. I move that the committee approves R277-302 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you, Member Lear, and thank you for catching that, Member Wood. The motion before the committee is that the committee approves R277-302 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All in favor say aye. Aye. And an aye from Member Hart. That passes 4-0 with Member Carey absent. Okay, Moving along to agenda item 2.5, R277-305, School Leadership License Areas of Concentration and Programs. Aaliyah, keep it going.
Okay, so here with this rule amendment in 305 school leadership, it would align to our recently adopted state code that license under endorsement. It really just reduces the barriers for any of our educators who completed school administrator training in a university program or a state other than Utah.
Any questions from the committee? Member Wood?
This isn't new language. I just have a question. So if they've come in and it says that change of either, so they either have to have gone through an actual educational process or pass a test. I mean, that's what it seems like based on the wording where it just says the school leadership assessment. Can you explain the assessment?
Sure. So the praxis examination for school leaders is required for every person who completes a Utah program. And if somebody comes from another state with an educator license in school administration and they have a year of experience under that license, then the praxis is waived, but they still have to complete a program.
Thank you. Member Lear?
You anticipated me, but isn't it true that there are multiple exceptions to educators needing, they don't need that leadership, or I'm reaching for the words. They don't, to be a school administrator, you don't need a specialized license anymore. Is that in almost all situations, or help me with what the distinction is?
Sure. So
That's
yeah, so the requirement per board rule is that school principals and school vice principals have to have a school leadership license area. Anybody else who's working in any administrative type of experience in an LEA, the leadership or the license requirement is defined by LEA policy, with the exception being charter schools. In state code, it says that any charter school director is not subject to any licensing requirements.
right. That's what I was trying to remember. And but it still is required for traditional school administrators. Is that right?
For school-based leaders in public districts, correct.
And do you have any idea? Have you ever done any data gathering to know how many total LEA administrators have those leadership credentials versus how many do not?
So at the school-based level, if they do not have a school leadership license area, then we send them a letter. We just are finished our first round of notifying the LEA that their principal or vice principal is not qualified for that position and that they need to work with their educator to become properly licensed.
So how many of those are there that are not?
I couldn't say off the top of my head for school leadership. I certainly could get that information to you this morning later.
I'm just curious how many don't have that kind of training. No, some, I could hear some. And I am curious how many don't are and is there any really consequence? Do they not get professional staff costs, or what are the?
So professional staff costs would be withheld from that administrator, which is equivalent, depending, it's a very complicated formula, around $2,200 to $2,600.
And that may be worth it to some LEAs to forego that rather than hassle their administrator.
Potentially, but they are not compliant with board rule, and that leads them open to corrective action.
Good, right. Interesting. I would like to know how many are out of compliance.
I'll get that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lear. Great questions. Yeah, great question. Yeah, sure. Let's get the motion pulled up on the board and get your mic on. Please, if you'll turn your microphone on.
Yes, I will. I move that the committee approves R277-305 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you, Member Lear. The motion on the floor is that the committee approves R277-305 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no discussion to that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this passes unanimously. Thank you. On to our next item, 2.6, R277-310, International Guest Teachers. And we again have Dr. Height.
Happy to be here still. So our last rule today is the International Guest Teacher License Rule 310. And we have one adjustment here, and that was to bring this rule in compliance with, to be in agreement with 301, stating that professional licenses are valid for 5 school years.
So an easy adjustment here, other than we go for, you see we're crossing out 3 to 5. Can you help us understand the jump there?
Yeah, so when an international guest teacher is comes to Utah through one of our partner countries, their first agreement or first contract with the LEA that hires them is for 3 years. But then at the end of those 3 years, then the LEA can occasionally, it usually ends up about 10% of the time that they extend that contract. And what we've found is that there are a lot of licensing hurdles for those individuals because of this 3-year weird alignment for a professional license. And so we would just suggest that we go to the 5 years so that it's the same cycle as every other professional license. This was also a disagreement that was brought forth by the audit committee.
Okay, thank you. Member Lear?
Sorry, I just, all of these areas really interest me. So sorry that I have so many questions, or thoughts. I have always been concerned, and this is not to sound, like I have a phobia about people coming from outside the United States, but that our background check process, a guest teacher shall, I'm looking at line 58, in required submission of information, including background check information. They don't have traditional background checks because they haven't been in the United States for the most part for many years, 20 years. And I had learned that the background checks that come from other countries are very different. Their standards are very different than ours. So I'm troubled that we just have been talking about our concern about background checks, and we have a group of teachers who don't have background checks that are the same rigor that is required locally. So can you speak to me about that? Make me feel any better about it, or?
Please.
Yes. So in the memorandum of understanding that the state of Utah, the Utah State Board has with these other countries, the candidates that those countries' embassies send are required to not have something associated at the same level of like a felony or anything from their country. And then we also do a background check and enroll them in RAPEX, so they're continuously monitored. So if they're arrested for anything in Utah or anywhere in the United States, we're immediately notified.
But that's only if for the years that they're here.
Yeah.
We don't. Do you have a document that comes with their credentials or with that says that what level of background check has been done in whatever country it is that they came from?
Yeah, so that's outlined in the memorandum of understanding with each of the country's embassies.
Okay. But there's no set standard because the countries vary in terms of what they call different kinds of crimes and things like that too.
Sure, I could certainly get that information for you if that was of
yeah,
interest.
I don't know that I can do anything about it. I'm
Yeah.
just troubled that, and increasingly, we're seeing more of these guest teachers because of sometimes dual immersion programs and other kinds of things. And I think it's a wonderful addition to our culture, but on the other hand, we hold our teachers to a certain standard, and I think these teachers are not held to the same standard, and that bothers me. So just a expression of frustration.
Is that accurate? Just from my own understanding, is the requirements different? I mean,
No, the
okay.
requirements are actually the same.
Okay,
And we make sure that it's required to have a minimum of a professional level license and 2 years of experience and a cleared background check with no crimes against children, no sexually explicit, nothing that we in the United States would consider a felony.
one of our
Yeah.
BCI, and then
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I mean, to Carol's point, I don't know how far-reaching these background checks are, but I do appreciate you confirming that the steps to getting in the classroom are the same for all. They're not easier for one person compared to another.
Yeah.
And not to be, I don't want to be contentious, but they can't possibly be exactly the same because they come from another country with a different preparation standard program. And even, we know that both culturally and legally, the crimes are defined differently from country to country. So I'm just, again, I don't want to argue with anybody, but they can't possibly be exactly the same. And my anecdotal information is that there were a number of teachers when I was working in that area that did not have the same understanding of their interactions with young people as our teachers were trained to. Now they have to take the ethics exam, such as it is, but there's many different personalities that come from different countries with different expectations. So I'm still a little troubled, but there's not anything. I think these programs are just multiplying and the teachers are multiplying, and that's the nature of our country. I just think it is worth noting when we get too hot and bothered about our background check requirements, that's not exactly the same for people from other countries.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Wood.
Oh, go ahead.
We'll get Member Wood, and then we'll get you, Molly.
Thanks.
So you said that these teachers had to come with at least 2 years of experience. How long do they teach here before you say that they are able to receive a professional license? It just says following a review and approval. How long is that approval process?
So they're licensed as soon as they arrive and we get their documentation.
So it's you determine as equal.
Yes, and that's in alignment with state law as well as 301. Anybody who has a professional level license in another state or country, if they have a license there, they get a license in Utah.
Okay, and so if they've had the 2 years experience and then you give them 3, it's same as it would be as if they had been teaching here for the 5 years, basically, that with the change that we're doing here.
Yeah, we're aligning. It used to be that we gave them a professional license for 3 years, and then they had things that they had to accomplish in 3 years that every other professionally licensed educator had 5 years to do. And so we're just aligning that to give them the same 5 years.
Okay, so then they'll have 3 plus an additional 2 before they'll have to
Correct.
reapply or do any. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Wood. Member Hart.
I know it's it's maybe small consolation, but so many of these teachers have to, get visas and get approval through their own government to come over. A number of the countries for the languages that some of the major languages that we teach, or we have a number of programs in, the government approves them to come over, and they've got a separate process. So between the visa process, their government process, their teacher training, they do have to run the gamut, and it does seem to hit that 3-year mark with a lot of the visas. So this is, I think, very helpful. It's expensive to come over and be a teacher in the States. The costs of getting those work visas and all of the legal paperwork. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness for the teachers. I do not think that it is a risk to our students any more than I don't think it's a huge amount of risk that we're taking on, although I do fully understand. And there's cultural differences in the way students are disciplined in the classroom. I mean, there's all kinds of interesting dynamics there. But they do go through quite the gamut of scrutiny from multiple governments. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Member Hart. Member Wood?
So I'm prepared to make a motion unless there's any other comments.
I don't see any other lights, so please.
Okay, I move that the committee approve R277310 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you, Member Wood. The motion before the committee is that the committee approves R277-310 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, on to our final agenda item. Thank you, Dr. Height, for covering those 4 rules. Yeah. Ben is here. Thank you. We would have had Dr. Height cover this one too, I guess. This is R277-472 Charter School Student Enrollment and Transfers and School District Capacity Information. And we have Ben here to tee us up.
Thank you, Chair. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. This is a rule that is up for its 5-year review. It governs if a charter school student wants to return to their school district of residence. No amendments are being proposed. We're simply asking the committee to extend it for another 5 years if that's your desire.
Thank you, Ben. And we haven't had any feedback from the field saying that changes need to be made. It doesn't sound like. Okay. Member Lear?
I just was recently, just coincidentally, I had a friend of a friend contact me wanting to get into a charter school and having a hard time getting enrolled. And so because of that, I was looking, I had a vague recollection that I think all schools have to post on their website information about their how full they are, their capacity. And I'm looking at line 104. A school district shall provide and post the following information to facilitate transfer students on districts or school websites. But I also thought each charter school shall post on its website.
Sorry.
I was started on line about 103, but then I was moving down to the charter school website requirements shall post on its website admission forms, school transfer forms, form for assurance. I had a recollection that they had to post the capacity if there was space available, but I'm not seeing it in here.
And does that sound familiar? I don't know
Angie?
how familiar with the rule you are, or Angie.
Does that sound familiar, or Ben?
My understanding is it's always been school districts for open enrollment purposes, and then also for purposes of this rule. I was not aware. I'm just looking at 551.5 to see if that's in the information that the rule references to. But
But this rule doesn't say that the charter school has to
So,
say how many seats are available or?
so if you look in 551.5, it does say that the charter school has to post the number of new students that will be admitted into the school.
New,
So
new students
That
though.
could be admitted, and that's a different rule. I get that.
And that's referenced in 472.
So that's where so a charter school should post its availability or capacity on its website. Is that what that's saying? It's a little roundabout way of saying it.
Yeah.
Angie, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't. Thank you, Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. It looks like in 1B, so this is R 2775551. It does say the number that they need to post the number of new students that will be admitted into the school. I don't see anything in there about their overall capacity, meaning if they'd have to say they have 30 spots available or they're going to be admitting 30, but it doesn't necessarily say, for example, that they have 350 as a cap. I don't see
trying
that
to-
there.
I'm trying to figure out what that means, though, what you just read, that the number of new students, is that the number of students in their incoming class, or?
It could be that. I would guess it's also the number of spots that they might have in other grades, not necessarily the entry level grade.
So just space. Would you consider that space is available?
I think so. It just says the number of new students that will be admitted into the school. So I would
That's,
interpret that to be this how many spots we have available for new students to enroll, right?
I would say if I have 50 spots from non-returning and I fill them with 30 district students, then I would say I've 30. I wouldn't say, I mean, as a charter, I would say, yeah, I still have
20
20
more.
spots, right? I want to fill those spots, but according to this rule, and I want to make a reminder note, we're discussing a rule that is not on the agenda. So I don't know how far into this we want to get, but I'm reading it a little bit differently.
Okay.
I'm gonna just stop there because again, this is not on the agenda. I'd love to jump back to Rule 472, but I do understand your questions, and I wonder, Carol, if these could be taken offline.
They can. I just was thinking that the title of this kind of looked like it might have that information in it. So I'm not completely.
Yeah,
Available.
I see they're correlated. And Molly, we'll get to you right after Member Lear finishes
that's
her
okay.
thoughts.
Go ahead, Ange. If were you gonna say something? That's fine. It just seems there should be a place, this rule 551, where parents can see what spaces are available. And I know it's fluid, but in a school where they seek to enroll, whether it's a district school, a traditional school, or a charter school. And maybe I'll just take that up with the appropriate people. Thanks. It looked like it might be in here and I was missing it.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Hart?
And maybe it's just the small subset I've worked with, but that has to be in your charter and your charter has to be available. So I don't know if that is a piece of the puzzle or not.
When you say available, not posted necessarily.
I interpret that to be posted because
I believe charters need to have charter schools need to have their charters publicly available.
They have to be publicly available.
Thanks. And I've got a unique situation where I have two of you to sort of pin to the wall.
Yeah, and I mean that I think, and maybe that's just practice, but I'm pretty sure that is where those numbers would be.
Sorry to detract. I know we had a little time and I just wanted to ask that question, thinking the answer might be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Wood?
I just have a question on class size capacity. I don't know.
I think this is directed to you, Ben.
You're fine. No, I'm just looking, it says, so a school shall calculate the average class size by the total number of students in a grade. And then you have this average over the district. So there's nothing in our rules, and I know this because we have complaints about class size all the time, but it seems interesting that you have an average over a district, you may have a school whose actual capacity is much less than another school. I mean, I think about my districts there with, you've got some that are huge and some are small. Does that actually apply to our smaller schools, that if they have capacity, even though they would not, but compared to the district that they would, like based solely on numbers?
My understanding is that the capacity is determined on a school by school basis, even though
Is it okay?
we
From
do-
when I was
we do
reading,
calculate
it
the
said
averages,
an
but you're still
average
looking at
district.
each school individually when you're looking at capacity, would be my understanding.
Okay, because it said the average school district capacity, and that didn't make sense to me, so. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. You're fine. Thank you, Member Wood. And I understand that district schools, the capacity, it seems to be whoever shows up. But charters do have a cap, right? So I didn't know if that's what you were asking, or if you were.
That's not exactly correct.
Okay.
The capacity for districts, especially if you're looking at open enrollment, people wanting to do open enrollment, a lot of districts have capacity, are filled to capacity and don't take open enrollment, or won't let students transfer between schools in the district as a
Right.
result of capacity issues.
Yeah, I just know we have some schools bursting at the seams, and I don't know where they would go if they didn't have that option, but now I'm getting off topic here, so apologies. Any other comments from the committee? Member Hart?
Yeah, so, hold on. So capacity, I understand is whatever the fire marshal says you can fit minus 10%. But I'm trying to see if that's in this one. Why do we have this one and the open enrollment? Like,
So
why do we have a
this-
separate rule for open enrollment?
May I, Chair? This rule is specific for charter school students that want to go back to their district of residence.
Oh, okay. I see. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I'd accept a motion. Or I'll make a motion.
I can make
Yeah.
it if you, hold on. I
Sure,
don't-
we're pulling it up on the screen right now. Member Hart, if you want to put that forward.
Sure, I will when I see the screen. Hold on. I think I can. All right, computer died. I can't see the screen. Someone else can
Okay,
read.
let me go ahead.
Actually-
Let me go ahead. And
And I'm going to take the first reading off, because we don't need that. It just needs to be
Okay.
approved.
so I move that the committee continue R277-472 and forward to the board for continuation on second, or let's, we're going to adjust the motion here.
Or for readings, because it's not being amended.
I move that the committee continue R277-472 and forward to the board for approval. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. That is the end of our agenda. Committee members, staff, thank you for your work on this, and enjoy a long break, 2 hours, until we meet here again. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.